What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the lastfigurestanding campaign for the Vintage Collection, including some of my picks, plus I've got some epic pickups to share. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 81 of Brett on Fett, and recently a brand new figure poll for the Vintage Collection was started called Last Figure Standing, and it was created by John Miko from the Vintage Collection Facebook group, Chris from Bantha Skull, and Tim from Boss Bounty. They did an awesome job, and it started off by them taking a poll on everyone's top 10 figure wish list for TVC. Chris from Bantha Skull worked his tail off compiling all that data and cleansing it for all consistent answers. And so what I want to do is talk about the top 10 figures that I initially voted for, then we'll compare that to the actual top 10 figures that made it from the poll, and then we'll get into the other rounds so far. But before we get into all of that, I do have some epic pickups I want to share with you guys, including some awesome vintage Kenner items that I'm really excited to show you. So let's get to it. All right, so first off, I got this Droid Depot 4-LOM. Now, Droid Depot is the brand of products sold at Disney's Galaxy's Edge at their Droid Depot shop where you go to build your own astromech droid. And I think this was one of the first figures they sold there, and I don't think they made very many because it just seems like it's really hard to find these. There's not a ton of them on eBay, and usually when they are, they're way too expensive. But recently there's been some more available and the price has dropped significantly, so I went ahead and picked one up. I've been wanting this figure for a while because of course I love the bounty hunter figures, and the TVC 4-LOM just isn't great, and this is actually a better version of 4-LOM in my opinion. He just looks really cool. I think the colors are more of an accurate match to the source material from Empire Strikes Back, and I really wish we could have used this for TVC. The Droid Depot card backs are interesting, of course not as good as Vintage Collection, but I do kind of like them. And I notice it says Droid Factory, and I guess that is the main brand, not Droid Depot, so I guess it's really a Droid Factory brand, but it's sold at Droid Depot, so it's got both logos on there. But anyways, really happy to finally get my hands on this 4-LOM figure. If you're a Droids fan or a Bounty Hunters fan, I would highly recommend you trying to pick up this figure if you can get it for a decent price. Now I just got to decide if I want to open him or not. Alright, now let's get to the good stuff. If you've been following my channel for a long time, you may recall about 5 months ago I got my very first vintage Kenner figure mint on card, and that was the Bosk on a 48 back C card. Now I love the 48 Cs because they have that free Revenge of the Jedi offer sticker on them, and I just think that's so cool that it says Revenge of the Jedi, and it just looks great. And the Bosk I picked up was such a stunner. It's just a great looking card. The only real issue with it is the tape that holds his gun came off and the gun is loose in the bubble, but other than that it's actually in really great shape. Now currently it's actually at the grader, so I'm waiting to get that back. He should be back sometime within the next few weeks, I'm hoping. But anyways, when I was able to pick up this Bosk, I decided at that point that I would like to have a goal of getting all of the Empire Strikes Back bounty hunters on a 48 back C. Now that's going to be somewhat of a challenge, and of course Boba Fett's in that mix, and we all know Boba Fett is ridiculously expensive, so I'm not sure what we're going to do about that. I might have to pick up a beater for Boba Fett, but I am trying to get nice examples of at least all of the other bounty hunters. And recently I moved one step closer to that goal by picking up a Zuckuss on 48 back C. Now of course Zuckuss we know is actually 4-LOM, but back then Kenner had it flip-flopped, and so it says Zuckuss of course. And I picked this up at Hake's auction, and it is another stunner. Now it's already graded. This one is AFA 75, but I'm telling you, it's the nicest 75 I've ever seen, and the only thing I can think of why it got the 75 is because just like my boss, the tape has come undone and his weapon is loose inside the bubble. And they did give the bubble a sub-score of 70 versus the card back got an 80 and the figure got an 80 as well. So I really think they graded it pretty harsh and based on that tape coming off and turning kind of a brownish color as well. But the fact that it got a 75 grade actually helped me get this figure. Had it gotten an 80, the competition would have been way too high at Hakes for me to afford, I'm afraid. And so I'm very happy to get a good deal on a 75 that looks this good. So very excited to have acquired another 48C back bounty hunter. Next, I'll be keeping my eyes out for a good deal on a 48 back C Dengar, an IG-88, or a Forlom. All right, and finally, I just got back my loose complete 1979 Taiwan Bobafett from grading at CAS. If you follow me on Instagram or you watch my YouTube short, then you may have seen me opening this figure and just being completely floored by the grade I got because it actually got a 90. I could not believe it. Holy shit. Getting a 90 is pretty difficult, even for CAS. You normally see really good examples of these loose figures at an 85. 80 is probably the most common. And so to get a 90 is just really exciting. Yes, I know AFA is a little more stringent, so it's not as prestigious, if you will, as getting a 90 with AFA, but it's still pretty awesome. And especially being a Taiwan Fett, which is the more rare of the Fets. You know, the most common one is Hong Kong, country of origin. So it's just really cool. It's got the legitimate V5 blaster on it, which is awesome. And so I just couldn't be happier. I was going to be excited if I got an 85, to be honest with you. So to get a 90 was just a really cool feeling. And I got to give a shout out to my friend and fellow YouTuber, John, the action figure grader. You got to follow Action Figure Grader because he does a series of videos called Buy It Now. And he found this Fett loose on eBay. You know, it was ungraded, but he has a great eye for condition, and he knew this Boba Fett was clean, and so he put it up on his Buy It Now video. I saw that, and I was able to bid and win that figure for a really good price. And so I really got to thank John, because if it weren't for me following his channel, I probably would not have found this figure. And so you got to go subscribe to Action Figure Grader, because maybe he'll help you find a gem like this as well. Alright, so now it's time to talk about the Last Figure Standing campaign, and this got started about 3 weeks ago, and like I was saying, it started out by polling everyone an open poll on the 10 most wanted figures for the vintage collection, and then after they cleaned up all of the data, they narrowed it down to 10 that we could use to vote on moving forward for all the rounds. Now, before I run through the top 10 that actually made it for this campaign, I want to first run through my personal top 10 that I voted for, and then we can look at how that stacked up. Now, before I start going through these, I do want to preface this by saying I made the decision to go strategic, and by that I mean I did not put any of the A New Hope main heroes in my top 10, despite really wanting those and knowing how important those are. And that's because I truly believe Hasbro is now going to make those. They've already committed to Princess Leia. On multiple occasions, Hasbro has mentioned make the mains and acknowledged they understand how important it is to us that those characters get made for the vintage collection. And so I just felt like voting for those would be a wasted vote, because I think the message has already gotten to them to make those. And I truly believe Hasbro will give us the rest of those main heroes within the next year or two at most. All right, so with that being said, let's go through my top 10 picks. Now, these are not going to be ranked in any order other than I put them in alphabetical order. Ranking them and explaining how I ranked them and why would just take too long for this video. So I thought I'd just keep it simple. So here is my top 10 most wanted figures for the vintage collection in alphabetical order. All right, first off is 21B. If you follow my channel, you know how much I love this droid. 21B was probably tied with Boba Fett as my favorite figure as a kid. I just think he's an awesome droid. And, you know, he saved Luke's life, basically, and gave him a hand. So, you know, no big deal. Kind of an important droid. Really hoping we get him, and he's part of the original 96. Next, I voted for Asajj Ventress, really important villain from the Clone Wars. She was even around in the original 2D Tartakovsky Clone Wars, and so we gotta have her. We're finally getting Dooku, and so Asajj would go great with Dooku. They already made her for the Black Series. They could just use that mold and rescan her. And I think she will come. She did very well in the March Madness. I think she placed second to Count Dooku, and so that says a lot. Next, I voted for the AT-AT driver, one of my favorite designs for the pilots and drivers, and just a great card back from Vintage Kenner, and we just really got to get him in TVC. Of course, he is part of the original 96. And I just love anything about the Hoth battle from Empire Strikes Back, so gotta have the AT-AT driver. Next, I voted for Cobb Vanth. I think everyone can agree that this is an important character from The Mandalorian, and it's very strange we do not have him yet in TVC, given all of the Mandalorian figures we do have in the line. And so I think this one will do very well. I think he did very well in the past March Madnesses. And so this is just a total no-brainer for the Vintage Collection and way overdue. Next up, I voted for Gar Saxon, one of my favorite Mandalorian designs. This guy just looks so awesome. And you know, we got those Darth Maul loyalist Mandos last year, but they didn't make Gar Saxon. Now, they recently gave us Pre-Vizsla, which was awesome, so they need to go ahead and give us Gar Saxon to help finish out the figures from that whole Siege of Mandalore episodes from the Clone Wars. Next, I voted for Garandan from A New Hope. If you watched my Halloween special, you know I featured this character on that video. He's just one of my favorite aliens from A New Hope. I think he's awesome, and so I really want him in TVC. Next up, I voted for the Imperial Patrol Trooper from Solo. I think he also made a brief appearance in the Andor series. This is just one of my favorite trooper designs, at least top 5 favorite trooper designs. And I think he was just a glaring omission from the figures TVC put out from Solo. And so I worry now that they will not make any more from that film. So that's why I wanted to get my vote in there. I want Hasbro to know that this is a popular trooper design. I know a lot of people that would love to see this in the Vintage Collection. Next up, I voted for the Imperial Snow Trooper or Hoth Stormtrooper. This is another no-brainer to me. Everyone loves Empire Strikes Back and the Hoth battle. And, you know, snowtroopers were such a cool design. They're very popular. And this would make great army builders. They could do a lot with this. Of course, I want this on a card. That is a classic card back film out. And so really, they need to make them on card and then offer army builder packs for this guy as well. This is just such an important figure. It's also, of course, an original 96. So come on, Hasbro, give us a snowtrooper. Next, I voted for Saw Gerrera. I love Rogue One, and he is a very important character from that film, and he's an important character from the Andor series as well. So to me, this is another no-brainer that we need Saw Gerrera. Now, spoiler alert, I did not put Baze Malbus in my top 10, and you could easily argue that is now the most important Rogue One character we need in the line. Since we already have Chirrut Imwe, we need his best buddy, and I would agree, but I still think Saw Gerrera is a more important character, especially since he now is portrayed in not 1, but 2 Star Wars media. And really 4 if you count Star Wars Jedi Survivor, the video game, and his appearances in the Clone Wars. And finally, rounding out my top 10 most wanted figures for TVC, I went ahead and voted for 2 tubes. Now, I just got through acknowledging how important it is to have Baze Malbus, but I had to go selfish here because I just really like the design of 2 tubes. I really want to see this guy in TVC. And like Saw Gerrera, he also appears in both Rogue One and the Andor series. Now, 2 tubes is actually 2 brothers. There's Benthic, which is the one pictured here, and then Edrio, which is his brother, which is in the background to the left. And I don't really care which one they make, although I have a slight preference for Benthic. I just like the way he looks with that jacket. But I assume if Hasbro made one, they could easily make the other brother. And so to me, this is another no-brainer and a character that is sorely missing from the line. Alright, so here's a look at the 10 figures that I chose for the Last Figure Standing campaign. And of those 10 figures, only 2 made it, and that being Cobb Vanth, and Asajj Ventress, which I was not surprised that those made it through, and I wasn't surprised that a lot of these didn't make it. My biggest surprise, however, was that the Snowtrooper didn't make it in the top 10. I thought that would be a lock, but apparently he came in a very close 11th place. Which brings us to who did actually make it. So here are the top 10 figures that made it for the Last Figure Standing campaign round 1. And it is the Tonica sisters who are being included as one candidate. Cobb Vanth, Luthen Rail, Hammerhead, Shin Hati, Baylan Skoll, Asajj Ventress, Anakin Skywalker from episode 3, Luke Skywalker from episode 4, and Old Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi from episode 4. Now, these are in no particular order, and the guys are not going to be revealing how the votes went exactly as far as ranking until the end of the campaign. But just want to run through these figures real quick. So Tonica sisters, not a huge shock. I know they have a huge following of people who really want her. She is missing from the Cantina, characters. And so not a surprise there. Cobb Vanth I already talked about. This is a no-brainer. Sorely missed in the Vintage Collection. Now, Luthen really surprised me. He is an awesome character from the Andor series, but he's not a super exciting character as far as toys go. And so I was a little bit surprised, but I definitely want to see him in the line. Do not get me wrong. I'm just simply surprised that he actually made it into the top 10 because, not everyone loved that series, even though, I feel like it's an excellent series, the best Disney has made next to The Mandalorian. And so I get it, but just surprised. Hammerhead, not a surprise at all. Awesome alien character. He definitely would be in my top 15, probably number 12 or 11. I love Ithorians, and he is an original 96er, and if you made Hammerhead, you could easily make that Ithorian from the Book of Boba Fett as well. Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll, those two, they have to go together. Awesome characters from Ahsoka, probably my favorite part about that show. And these two would probably be in my top 15 most wanted figures as well. So not a surprise, and I'm happy to see them make the final 10. Asajj Ventress, I already talked about how important she is. She did so well in the March Madness, and so I suspect she will move pretty far along in this campaign. Next is Anakin Skywalker from episode 3. Now this one I was not shocked by, but just a little bit surprised. And the reason I didn't vote for Anakin is because we already have him in the Vintage Collection. Yes, it's an outdated figure. Yes, it's not a great figure, and so I acknowledge it is very important that they remake Anakin. But I personally would prefer to see characters that haven't been made at all make it to TVC first, and then go back and redo the characters that need updates. That's just how I feel about it, but I'm not upset at all that he was on that list. The last two, Farm Boy Luke and Old Ben Kenobi from A New Hope, goes without saying. Not a surprise at all. These are very important characters. We all want these characters. They've got to make them. Again, I didn't vote for them because I really believe Hasbro is going to give us these characters within the next year or two, and so I thought it would be a wasted vote. But again, these are awesome characters, legends of Star Wars. You gotta have these two in the line. Alright, so these are the 10 that made the cut for the Last Figure Standing voting. And we've already had round 1, which is where everyone had to pick their top 5 from these 10. And from those votes, the guys actually selected 6 figures to move forward to round 2. And so they revealed those yesterday. And so here are the top 6 that made it. And so the top 6 figures that are moving on to round 2 are the Tonica sisters, Cobb Vanth, Hammerhead, Shin Hati, Baylan Skoll, and Asajj Ventress. Now, some surprises here, mainly that Farm Boy Luke and Old Ben Kenobi got voted out. Those are characters, obviously, we desperately need in the Vintage Collection, and I can only assume the voters took on my strategy by leaving those two out because they feel that Hasbro is going to make them eventually, and so they decided to put their votes towards other characters that are not necessarily a lock. The Tonica sister staying alive was a little bit of a surprise to me, but I guess we cannot underestimate the power of the Time for Tonica team led by Victoria from Victoria's Cantina. Alright, so round 2 is now getting underway, and for round 2, you've got to vote for 3 of the remaining 6, and from those votes, the guys are going to narrow the list down to 4 characters for round 3. So go cast your top 3 figure votes for round 2. You can do so by finding the Last Figure Standing Instagram page. It's last.figure.standing. I'll put it in the description for this video, and you can download the Google form and enter your votes. Now, as of this moment, I have not yet decided who my top 3 I will be voting for, but I will make that decision soon. I'll cast my vote, and I'll share with you guys who I chose on a future video. Alright, so that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Last Figure campaign so far. If you haven't already, go sign up and cast your vote in that campaign. Thanks for checking out this video. Thank you so much to my subscribers. Don't forget you can also follow me on Instagram and on X. Take care, and we'll see you next time.